Hey everyone, welcome back into some Entitled People stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who thought their personal rules overrode everyone else's. One involves a woman who treated a cafe queue like a suggestion, another a stranger who learned child safety from TikTok and tried to physically move a sleeping toddler, and the last a neighbor who spent years claiming a public sidewalk as her own until a police officer let her dig her own grave. Here we go. My lunch break is 45 minutes. Karen's ego is infinite. It was a standard weekday lunchtime at my local cafe, the kind of place that survives entirely on caffeine, sandwiches, and the illusion that we all have our lives together. I had exactly 45 minutes for my lunch break and wanted nothing more than a quick flat white before heading back to work. The line was short, just one woman ahead of me at the counter, and I was standing there minding my own business. The woman in front of me was finishing up her order and chatting politely with the barista. Everything was moving at a normal, reasonable pace. I had mentally calculated that I'd be in and out within 5 minutes. That's when Karen entered the scene. She didn't join the queue. She drifted in from the side like she was floating on a breeze of self-importance and stationed herself directly next to the woman being served. "Oh, hi," she chirped, leaning in. "What did you order?" The tone was syrupy sweet, but the positioning was strategic. At first, I assumed they were just friends who had run into each other by chance. Karen was nodding and asking about the menu, all very casual. "Oh, that sounds lovely," she said. "Did you get the soup or the salad?" It felt like background noise, so I didn't immediately clock what was happening. Then her friend paid, took her receipt, and left. Karen did not move. Instead, she pivoted seamlessly toward the counter and said, "Hi, I'll have," as if she'd been in line all along. No glance backward, no acknowledgement of the very obvious cue, just a smooth transition from spectator to active customer. She didn't cut the line, she just absorbed into it, like she materialized there through sheer force of will. No awkward shuffle, no eye contact with the people waiting, just a casual assumption that the rules don't apply when you stand close enough to someone who's already ordering. I felt my blood pressure spike. It was so blatant it almost impressed me. There had been no hesitation, no, "Oh, sorry, are you in line?" She simply absorbed the space and claimed it. I looked around, half expecting someone else to call it out, but everyone else was doing that British thing where we silently endure mild injustice while glaring internally. Karen, of course, was not in a hurry now that she had secured her stolen spot. She began peppering the barista with questions about the menu. "Is the chicken free range? Does the dressing have dairy? Can I swap the bread for sourdough?" Each question was delivered with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no in her life. Meanwhile, I stood there watching my precious lunch minutes evaporate. After several adjustments to her order, she added, "Oh, and I'll have a latte." Then, as if to extend the performance, she asked for a loyalty card and proceeded to ask how many stamps were needed for a free drink. The barista patiently explained the system while I imagined steam physically rising from my ears. I decided I wasn't going to let it go. Not because it was the crime of the century, but because the audacity deserved acknowledgement. I told myself I'd wait until she finished ordering so I wouldn't make the barista's life harder. Karen finally paid, collected her little loyalty card like a trophy, and turned to leave. That's when I spoke up. "Next time," I said clearly, "you might want to take your place in the queue rather than pushing in." She froze mid-step and turned back, eyes wide in theatrical innocence. "Oh, I didn't realize there was an issue," she said. "My friend and I had the same table number." I blinked. "That makes zero difference," I replied. "You ordered and paid separately. You weren't in the queue." She tilted her head slightly as if she was trying to process basic physics. "Well, I was just standing with her." "Yes," I said evenly, "standing next to someone in line doesn't magically make you part of the line." A few people behind me shifted, clearly listening now. The barista stared very intently at the card machine. Karen attempted one last maneuver. "I think you're overreacting," she said with a tight smile. "I think you knew exactly what you were doing," I replied. "It's lunchtime, we're all on breaks, waiting an extra minute won't kill you." Her expression flickered from fake confusion to mild annoyance. For a second, I thought she might double down. Instead, she gave a small huff and walked toward the seating area without another word. When I stepped up to the counter, the barista gave me a quick, grateful glance. "Sorry about that," she murmured. "Not your fault," I said, "just needed to be said." As I waited for my coffee, I glanced over at Karen. She was seated at a table with her friend, leaning in and whispering animatedly. I have no doubt I was the villain in her version of the story, the aggressive Q enthusiast who attacked her over a harmless misunderstanding. The thing is, it wasn't harmless. It's never about just one spot in line. It's about the casual entitlement, the assumption that everyone else's time is negotiable, but yours is sacred. It's the belief that if you stand close enough to someone at the counter, social norms simply bend around you. I grabbed my coffee and headed out, checking the time. I still had enough of my break left to drink it while it was hot. As I walked past Karen's table, she avoided eye contact entirely. For the rest of the week, I half expected to see her again. If I do, I'll be ready. I have no problem waiting my turn. I just don't see why everyone else should have to wait for someone who thinks queues are optional. And our second story. My niece was peacefully dozing on me when a woman who learned child safety from TikTok tried to physically move her. Once a month, my community organizes these casual neighborhood gatherings in the shared courtyard behind our apartment buildings. Nothing fancy, just folding tables, buffet trays, kids running in circles, and adults pretending they're not exhausted from work. It's meant to be a low-pressure way for people to get to know each other, especially the newer families who've moved in over the last few years. I'm 34, and I usually show up for the food and to spend time with my sister and her family. My niece, who just turned 2, has decided I'm her favorite human being. Every time she sees me, she runs full speed in my direction like I've just returned from a 5-year expedition. She clings to my legs, demands to be picked up, and insists on sitting on my lap like it's her assigned seat in life. Her parents, my little sister, and my brother-in-law trust me completely. I'm a paramedic, so I've been around babies, chaos, and emergencies for years. I was there through my sister's entire pregnancy, helped coordinate hospital logistics when her water broke, and was practically running point in the delivery ward until my brother-in-law could catch up. My niece has known my voice since before she knew how to focus her eyes. So last week was business as usual. I was sitting at one of the picnic tables, minding my own business and sipping a soda, when my little lady spotted me. She sprinted across the grass with the determined wobble only toddlers can manage. She grabbed my knees and tried to climb me like I was playground equipment. I picked her up and settled her on my lap. She immediately leaned her head against my chest and wrapped one arm around my shirt. My sister came over and said she skipped her nap again. That explained the heavy eyelids and quiet snuggling. Within minutes, she was almost asleep. About 20 minutes later, just as she was drifting into that warm, floppy toddler sleep, a woman I'd never seen before appeared out of nowhere. She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. She smiled stiffly and introduced herself as Vanessa. "Who's this?" she asked, gesturing toward my niece. "My niece," I replied quietly. "Could you lower your voice a bit? She's about to fall asleep." I don't know what short-circuited in her brain at that exact moment, but her expression shifted like I'd just confessed to a felony. "Adult," she began, lowering her voice but not her intensity, "especially men shouldn't be touching other people's kids, even if they're relatives." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "She's literally falling asleep on me," I said calmly. "I think she's more than comfortable." She folded her arms. "That doesn't make it appropriate." I tried to keep my voice even because my niece was already stirring. "Where exactly are you getting this idea?" Her chin lifted slightly. "I saw it on TikTok. Several infancy influencers have talked about how physical contact between adult men and little girls is unhealthy and suspicious." I stared at her for a second, waiting for a punchline that never came. "TikTok," I repeated flatly. Wow, she saw it on TikTok. She walked up to a sleeping toddler, woke her up, and started lecturing her uncle based on something an influencer said for views. Some people really outsource their entire moral compass to whatever pops up on their feed. That apparently offended her more than the accusation itself. She leaned closer and reached out to poke my niece's shoulder. "Sweetie, you shouldn't be sitting like that," she said in a sing-song voice. My niece, who'd been half asleep, jolted awake and frowned. Vanessa poked her again, trying to physically move her off my lap. At that point, my niece's lip started trembling. She shoved Vanessa's hand away and let out a small, distressed whine. "Please stop touching her," I said, my patience thinning. Vanessa ignored me and tried once more to rouse her fully, saying, "Come on, you shouldn't be sitting with him like that." That was enough. My niece started crying properly now, clinging to me and burying her face against my chest. The quiet courtyard was suddenly not so quiet. Before I could say anything else, my sister appeared. She had the expression of someone who had just heard her child cry in a tone she didn't like. "What's going on?" she asked sharply. Vanessa didn't hesitate. "I was just explaining that adult men shouldn't have little girls sitting on their laps. You should really keep an eye on him, even if he is your brother." The air changed. My sister didn't yell. She didn't curse. She just stepped closer, her voice calm in that way that makes people nervous. "That man," she said evenly, pointing at me, "is a paramedic. He oversaw my entire pregnancy. When my water broke, he was the one coordinating with the hospital. He handled logistics so I could focus on not panicking. After my husband, he was the first person my daughter saw when she entered this world." Vanessa opened her mouth, but my sister wasn't done. "He has changed diapers, cleaned, spit up, babysat overnight, and rocked her to sleep more times than I can count. If you're implying something inappropriate about my brother, you need to wash your mouth before you speak again." There was a silence that stretched longer than it needed to. Vanessa tried to recover. "I'm just saying you can never be too careful. The internet is full of nonsense," my sister cut in, "and you just woke up my child to repeat it." At that point, I quietly stood up and carried my niece toward the buffet tables. She was still sniffling, now fully awake and annoyed with the world. I didn't feel like escalating things further in front of her. She stomped her little boots as we walked, muttering toddler syllables of discontent. Fortunately, she inherited her mother's love of food. A small plate of spaghetti with an unreasonable amount of Parmesan worked miracles. Within 5 minutes, she was back to her cheerful self, cheeks dusted with cheese and eyes bright again. Across the courtyard, Vanessa had retreated into a tight cluster of people who looked vaguely uncomfortable. My sister joined me shortly after, shaking her head. "TikTok," she muttered. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was an edge to it. "There should be a license required before someone's allowed to download the internet," I said. What bothered me most wasn't the accusation itself, it was how easily a stranger felt entitled to project suspicion onto a normal, loving interaction between an uncle and his niece. There's a saying we have that fits perfectly here: the malice is in the eye of the beholder. If someone looks at a tired toddler falling asleep on her uncle and sees something sinister, that says far more about their worldview than about the situation. Families are built on trust, affection, and physical closeness. Demonizing that because a social media influencer needed content for a video is absurd. Vanessa didn't approach us again that afternoon. My niece eventually fell asleep properly later, this time in her father's arms, without commentary from the TikTok morality police. As for me, I'm still her favorite climbing frame, and if anyone else wants to challenge that based on something they saw in a 15-second video, they're welcome to try explaining it to her mother first. And our last story. My mom's friend, the police officer, let Karen dig her own grave. When I was younger, my family lived in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of a small city. It was one of those areas where everyone more or less knew each other, whether they liked it or not. There were no proper sidewalks on our side of the street, just grass meeting asphalt. The only actual sidewalk ran along the opposite side, directly in front of our neighbor's house. And it was so cracked and uneven that calling it a sidewalk felt generous. People had been asking the city to fix it for years. The concrete slabs were lifted, chipped, and held together by stubbornness and weeds. In winter, it turned into an icy obstacle course. That detail matters, because the woman who lived in front of that sidewalk treated it like it was private property deeded to her personally by the mayor. We'll call her Mrs. Hannah, though everyone on the street just called her Karen behind her back. She was older, retired, and permanently stationed at her front window like a security camera fueled by spite. If you wanted news to spread across the neighborhood within an hour, you just had to tell her something and whisper, "Please don't tell anyone." By sunset, it'd be common knowledge. Whenever we had guests, they parked in front of our house without issue. On bigger occasions, like barbecues or birthday parties, cars would line both sides of the street. No gates were blocked, no driveways obstructed, and traffic still flowed freely. That was fine with every neighbor except Karen. The moment a car stopped in front of her house, she would storm outside like someone had just committed a felony. "How dare you park your filthy car on my sidewalk?" she would yell, arms flailing as if she were warding off demons instead of sedans. My mother, to her credit, was not someone who accepted being yelled at. She had multiple heated discussions with Karen about property law. "You do not own anything outside your fence," my mother would say calmly but firmly. "The sidewalk is public property. As long as there's space for a wheelchair or stroller to pass, anyone can park here." Karen never accepted that explanation. She would grumble, glare, and retreat only to repeat the entire performance the next time someone parked there. It became a ritual. Guests would arrive, we would brace ourselves, and like clockwork, the front door across the street would slam open. She treated a crumbling public sidewalk like her personal driveway. Every guest, every parked car, same performance. It wasn't about legality, it was about having someone to yell at. One winter afternoon, my mom's friend Tomek came over for coffee. Tomek was a local police officer and specialized in road and traffic law. My mom vented about Karen's obsession with the sidewalk, and Tomek laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. "That thing," he said, "that's barely a sidewalk. It's a historical monument to neglect." As he was leaving, he said casually, "I'll stop by tomorrow during lunch." My mom raised an eyebrow, but he just smiled and walked out. The next day, my brother and I were outside playing in the snow when a black police car pulled up directly in front of Karen's house. The driver stepped out in full uniform, hat and all. It was Tomek, moving deliberately, as if he'd rehearsed this moment in his head. Right on cue, Karen burst out of her house. "You can't park here," she shrieked. "This is my sidewalk. Get your filthy car off my prop." Tomek turned slowly, almost theatrically. "Excuse me?" he asked, adjusting his cap. "You're telling me I can't park here?" "Yes," she snapped, though her voice had already lost some of its bite. "But this is a public sidewalk," he replied evenly. "No, it's my sidewalk," she insisted, crossing her arms. Tomek nodded thoughtfully. "So let me understand this correctly. This sidewalk belongs to you?" "Yes," she said, standing a little straighter, clearly proud of herself. "And you're responsible for maintaining it?" he continued. "Well, yes, that's why I don't allow anyone to park here." Tomek's expression shifted into something that looked suspiciously like delight. "Oh, how fortunate. Since it's your sidewalk, that means you're responsible for clearing the snow to prevent hazards for pedestrians. I noticed it hasn't been shoveled. I'll need to issue a fine for endangering public safety." He pulled out his notepad. Karen blinked, "But no other sidewalks are cleared." "That's correct," Tomek said calmly. "Those belong to the city. Municipal crews handle them. But since you just told me this one belongs to you, the responsibility falls on you." Her confidence evaporated in real time. "I'm old," she said defensively. "I can't shovel snow." "Then you'd need to hire someone," he replied. "Unless, of course, this sidewalk is actually public property." She hesitated. "It's not mine." Tomek tilted his head. "A moment ago, you were very certain it was. I just need to know whether to write this fine." "It's not mine," she repeated quickly. "Good," he said, tucking the notebook away. "Then I suggest you refrain from claiming ownership of public property in the future, and harassing people over legal parking can also result in a citation." She didn't say another word. Tomek crossed the street and came into our house for coffee like he had just wrapped up the most satisfying shift of his career. From that day on, Karen never yelled at anyone for parking in front of her house again. She stood at her window watching with the intensity of someone trying to burn holes through metal with her eyes, but the dramatic sidewalk speeches were over. It turned out that the fastest way to end her reign over that crumbling strip of concrete wasn't another argument. It was letting her own logic shovel her into a corner and asking if she wanted the fine to go with it. Story 3 wins for me because the resolution was so clean. Opie's mom spent years arguing property lines. Tomek spent 2 minutes letting Karen's own words trap her. He didn't threaten, just asked the logical next question and watched her crumble. She never yelled at another parked car again. Some lessons only stick when they come with a pen and a notepad. Which one made you smile? Drop your vote in the comments. 1, 2, or 3. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.